They say that silence is golden, but in a house that has been slowly emptying out for a decade, silence feels a lot more like lead, heavy, poisonous, and capable of crushing you if you sit under it for too long. The living room of my bungalow on the west side of Detroit was dark, lit only by the flickering goo light of the television. I am Frank O'Connor. I am 71 years old. For 40 years, I worked the line at Ford, starting as a sweeper and ending as a foreman. My hands are stained permanently with the ghost of engine grease and hard work. No amount of scrubbing can get the black out of the creases of my knuckles. I sat in my recliner, the leather cracked and worn in the shape of my back, nursing a cup of coffee that had gone lukewarm an hour ago. I was waiting. I am always waiting these days, waiting for the pension check, waiting for the winter to end. But mostly, I was waiting for Leo. Leo is my grandson. He is 22 years old, with his mother's eyes and his father's utter lack of a moral compass. He had borrowed my car 4 hours ago. It's a 2018 Chevy Impala, metallic blue, the last new thing I ever bought for myself. He told me he had a job interview across town at a logistics center. I wanted to believe him. God help me, I needed to believe him. I raised him after my daughter, his mother, died of an overdose 10 years ago. I promised her at the funeral, staring at her casket, that I wouldn't let the boy fall into the same hole she did. But promises whispered to the dead are hard to keep when the living are intent on breaking them. I checked the clock on the wall. 5 p.m. He was late. He was always late. I pointed the remote at the TV and turned up the volume on Channel 4. I liked the local news. It felt grounded. It felt real. "Breaking news," the anchor said. Her face was grim, the kind of practiced seriousness they wear when someone has been hurt. "Armed robbery at the Check and Go on 8th Street. I took a sip of the cold coffee, shaking my head. 8th Street? That was only 3 miles away. The city was eating itself alive, one payday lender at a time. "Police are asking for the public's help identifying the getaway vehicle," the anchor continued. The screen cut to a grainy black and white video feed. It showed the front of the loan store. 2 men in masks ran out, shoving guns into their waistbands. They sprinted toward a car idling at the curb. My coffee cup froze halfway to my mouth. It was a blue sedan, a Chevy Impala. "It's a common car," I whispered to the empty room. "There are a million of them in Detroit." Then the camera angle switched. It showed the car peeling away, tires smoking. The rear bumper came into clear view. My heart stopped. It didn't just skip a beat, it seized in my chest like an engine throwing a rod. There, on the left side of the bumper, was a dent. A specific, crescent-shaped indentation where I had backed into a fire hydrant at the grocery store 6 months ago. I hadn't fixed it because the pension was tight, and above it, in the rear window, was the sticker. The mug slipped from my fingers. It hit the carpet with a dull thud, coffee splashing onto my socks, but I didn't feel the heat. I couldn't feel anything. I stared at the screen. That was my car. That was the machine I washed every Sunday. That was the car I drove to Mass. That was the car I used to take Leo to the movies when he was a teenager, back when I thought I could save him. Witnesses say the clerk was pistol whipped, the anchor said, her voice sounding far away, like she was speaking from the bottom of a well. Pistol whipped. Blood. Violence. My car was the instrument of terror. My grandson had the keys. I sat there for 10 minutes, the coffee staining the rug, my breath coming in shallow, ragged gasps. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe the car was stolen. Maybe Leo had stopped for gas and someone had carjacked him. Maybe he was lying in a ditch somewhere, a victim himself. Then I heard it, the distinctive rumble of the V6 engine pulling into the driveway. I know that sound better than I know my own voice. It wasn't the sound of a car being driven by a stranger. It was the sound of a driver who knows exactly how to feather the gas to keep the loose belt from squealing. The front door opened. Leo walked in. He was wearing a dark hoodie, the hood pulled up over a baseball cap. He was vibrating. I could feel the energy radiating off him from across the room, a frantic electric buzz of adrenaline. He was sweating, beads of perspiration rolling down his temples despite the biting November chill outside. He didn't look at me. He walked straight to the kitchen table and tossed my keys onto the wood. Clatter. The sound echoed like a gunshot in the quiet house. "What?" I asked. My voice surprised me. It was steady. It didn't shake. It was the voice of the foreman, the man who had to fire people for coming to the line drunk. But inside, I was screaming. Inside, I was mourning the death of the boy I loved. Leo flinched. He hadn't noticed I was watching him. He turned to the fridge, grabbing a beer. "It was good," he said, popping the tab. He took a long, desperate gulp. "They said they'll call me. It went." "That's good," I said. "A bitch," Leo said, wiping his mouth with the back of his hand. "What?" I asked, leaning forward in my chair, the leather creaking under my weight. Leo froze. He stopped mid-swallow. He lowered the can slowly. He turned to face me. The look in his eyes wasn't guilt. I wished it was guilt. Guilt implies a conscience. Guilt implies that he knew he had done wrong and felt the weight of it. No, the look in his eyes was aggression. It was the look of a cornered animal deciding whether to flee or bite. "What?" asked. His voice dropped an octave, losing the casual grandson tone, replaced by something harder. "I saw the car, Leo," I said. "I saw it on the news. Channel 4. The robbery at the check-and-go. I saw the dent." Leo stared at me for a long beat. Then he laughed. It was a cruel, dismissive sound. It was a laugh designed to make me feel small. "You're losing it, Gramps," he sneered. "Your eyes are shot. You can barely read the menu at the diner, and you think you saw a bumper sticker on a moving car on TV? "I know my car, Leo," I said, my voice rising. "He," snapped, stepping toward me. He used his height to intimidate me, looming over the recliner. "There are a million blue Impalas in Detroit. It's the most common car in the city." "The dent," I whispered. "What dent?" He took another sip of beer, his eyes cold. "Maybe it's time we upped your meds, Frank. You're starting to imagine things." He bumped my shoulder as he walked past me toward the stairs. It wasn't an accident. It was a check. He was testing my strength. He was telling me that he was the alpha now, and I was just the confused old man paying the bills. "Stop making up stories," he called over his shoulder. "I'm going to take a nap." I watched him walk up the stairs. The boy I taught to tie his shoes. The boy I held when he cried over his mother's casket. And I realized with a crushing finality that he isn't just a liar. He is dangerous. He thinks I am a senile old fool he can manipulate. He thinks he can use my love as a shield and my property as a weapon. If you have ever trusted a family member with your heart, handed them the keys to your life, only to have them pawn it for quick cash and gaslight you about the theft, you know this specific kind of heartbreak. It stops your breath. It makes you question your own reality. If you're listening to this and you know what it feels like to realize the monster is sleeping in the room upstairs, take a moment to subscribe right now. Because I am about to show you that just because I'm retired doesn't mean I've stopped working. And just because I'm old doesn't mean I'm helpless. I sat there until I heard his bedroom door slam shut. I waited another 10 minutes until the house settled back into its heavy silence. Then I stood up. My knees popped, my back ached, but I moved. I walked to the kitchen and grabbed the heavy Maglite flashlight from the drawer. I didn't turn on the porch light. I opened the front door and stepped out into the cold. The wind bit through my flannel shirt, but I didn't feel it. I felt only the burning need for truth. I walked to the Impala. It sat in the driveway, ticking as the metal cooled. It looked innocent. It looked like a grandpa's car. I shined a light on the rear bumper. There was the dent. I shined the light on the window. There was the sticker. I tried the door handle. Unlocked. Careless. I opened the rear door. I shined the beam onto the floorboards. At first glance, it was clean. Leo had tossed the fast food wrappers at least. But I leaned in. I smelled it. The sharp scent of gunpowder and sweat. I ran my hand deep into the crack between the seat cushions. My fingers brushed against something soft. I pulled it out. A black ski mask. Cheap wool. Still damp with sweat. I reached back in. My fingers touched paper. I pulled it out. It was a paper band, a currency strap, check and go, $2,000. My heart broke. It didn't crack, it shattered into dust. It was the final confirmation that my daughter's legacy was gone. The boy was gone. All there was left was a criminal who would pistol whip a clerk for a stack of bills. I stood there in the dark driveway, holding the mask in one hand and the money wrapper in the other. Tears pricked my eyes, hot and angry. I wanted to go upstairs and shake him. I wanted to scream. I wanted to be the grandfather who could fix this. But you can't fix a rot that has gone to the bone. You can only cut it out. He thinks he owns me. He thinks he owns this car. He thinks I'm a confused old man who will swallow his lies because I'm afraid of being alone. He forgot who I am. I am a foreman. I ran a line that produced 400 cars a shift. I know machines. I know how to make them run, and I know how to make them stop. I popped the hood of the Impala. The latch clicked loudly in the night air. I lifted the heavy metal. The engine block was still warm, radiating heat against my face. I looked at the nest of wires, hoses, and sensors. To most people, it's a mystery. To me, it's a language I have spoken for 50 years. I looked up at the window of Leo's bedroom. The light was off. He was sleeping the sleep of the guilty and the arrogant. He thought he had gotten away with it. He thought tomorrow he would wake up, take the car, and do it again. Maybe rob a liquor store. Maybe kill someone this time. Fine. I whispered to the cold night air, my voice turning into white mist. Fine. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my multi-tool. I looked at the fuel pump relay wiring. I knew exactly what I needed to do. I wasn't going to disable the car. Not here. That would be too easy. That would just make him angry. No. I was going to give him a leash. And when he ran to the end of it, I was going to yank it so hard it would snap his neck. I leaned over the engine, the flashlight clamped between my teeth, and I went to work. The mechanic in me had woken up, and he wasn't taking any prisoners. The dawn didn't break over Detroit. It bruised the sky, turning the horizon into a smudge of purple and charcoal gray that looked more like a healing wound than a new beginning. I hadn't slept. Sleep is for the innocent, and after what I saw on the news last night, innocence is a luxury I can no longer afford. I lay in bed staring at the water stain on the ceiling until the digital clock on the nightstand read 4:50 a.m. Then I swung my legs out from under the quilt. The floorboards were cold, but the chill inside my chest was colder. The house was silent. Upstairs, in the room that used to be his mother's, Leo was sleeping. He was likely sprawled out, mouth open, sleeping the deep, dreamless sleep of the guilty and the lazy.
He thought he had fooled me. He thought the senile old man had bought his story about traffic and interviews. He didn't know that the old man was currently pulling on his work boots, the same Red Wings I wore on the assembly line for 20 years, preparing to go to work one last time. I didn't make coffee. The smell would drift upstairs. I didn't turn on the radio. I moved through the kitchen like a ghost, grabbing the spare key to the garage from the hook behind the pantry door. I stepped out into the biting morning air. Frost covered the grass, crunching softly under my boots. I walked to the detached garage, my breath pluming in front of me like white smoke. Inside, the air smelled of gasoline, old oil, and sawdust, the perfume of my life. I walked to the metal shelving unit in the back. There it was, my red snap-on toolbox. I bought it in 1980 with my first overtime check. It weighed a ton, filled with American steel wrenches and sockets that had never stripped a bolt. I hefted it down, the metal handle biting into my palm. It felt familiar. It felt like control. I approached the Impala. It was parked crooked, a testament to Leo's carelessness. I opened the driver's side door, but I kept my thumb on the door switch, pressing it in so the dome light wouldn't flare to life. I didn't want a beacon. I wanted shadows. I popped the hood. The latch gave a satisfying metallic thunk. I walked to the front of the car and lifted the hood, propping it up. I clicked on my small pen light, holding it in my teeth. The beam cut through the gloom, illuminating the engine block. I stared at the machinery. To Leo, this was just a magic box that made the wheels turn when he pressed the pedal. To me, it was a map. I knew every hose, every sensor, every relay. I knew the firing order of the cylinders. I knew the flow of the fuel. I reached into my toolbox and pulled out a small black plastic box. It wasn't a factory part. It was something I had rigged together last night at the kitchen table after I found the ski mask. A remote relay switch, salvaged from an old garage door opener, wired to a heavy-duty 30-amp fuse. I wasn't calling the police, not yet. If I called them now, Leo would wake up with a badge in his face. He would lie. He would say I loaned him the car. He would say he found the mask in the money wrapper and was planning to turn him in. And they might believe him. No, I needed him behind the wheel. I needed him in the driver's seat, thinking he was the king of the road, when the hammer dropped. I tucked the black box deep under the air intake housing, zip-tying it to a wire loom where it looked like just another piece of factory equipment. It was invisible unless you knew exactly what you were looking for. Next came the tracking. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the burner smartphone I kept for emergencies. I had downloaded a tracking app on it hours ago. I taped the phone securely under the dashboard, high up near the firewall, and hardwired it to the battery terminal with a splice connector. It would never run out of power. I checked my work. Clean, professional. I closed the hood. I used a rag to wipe the smudge of grease from the fender. I wiped the door handle. I left no trace that I had been there. I went back inside, washed my hands with Gojo, and sat in my recliner. Now the hard part began, the waiting. The sun came up, turning the gray sky to a pale, watery blue. I heard the furnace kick on. I heard the mailman walk by. Finally, at 1 p.m., I heard the floorboards creak upstairs. Leo came down 10 minutes later. He looked terrible. His eyes were bloodshot, rimmed with red, and his skin had the pale, clammy look of a hangover. He was wearing the same hoodie. He walked into the kitchen, ignoring me, and drank juice straight from the carton. He wiped his mouth and turned to me. The arrogance coming off him was palpable. It was a shield he used to keep the world away. "I need the car again," he said. There was just the demand of a boy who had never been told no, in a language he understood. I asked. I kept my face blank. I kept my hands wrapped around my mug so he wouldn't see them tightening. "Yeah," Leo said, leaning against the counter. "Call back. Second round." He smirked. It was a small twisting of his lips that said, "I got you." He thought I had bought the lie yesterday. He thought his gaslighting had worked, that I was questioning my own memory of the news report. "Don't wait up," he added, snatching the keys off the table.
He didn't see the sorrow in my eyes. He didn't look deep enough to see the grief of a man who was about to cut off his own limb to save the body. He only saw the keys. He only saw the escape. "Leo," I said. He stopped at the door, his hand on the knob. He sighed, a sound of exaggerated patience. "Be careful," I said. My voice was low, raspy. Cars can be unpredictable when they get old. Sometimes they just... He rolled his eyes. "Whatever, old man." He walked out. I didn't move. I listened. I heard the car door slam. I heard the engine crank, strong, immediate. The kill switch was dormant, waiting for the signal. I heard him back out of the driveway, too fast, the tires chirping on the pavement. He was gone. I waited 5 minutes. The house settled back into silence. But it wasn't peaceful. It was the silence of a held breath. I pulled out my personal phone. I opened the tracking app. The blue dot blinked on the screen. It was moving east. He wasn't going to the logistics center.
He wasn't going to an office park. He was heading straight toward the industrial district, weaving through the side streets. He was heading toward Fifth Avenue. I knew what was on Fifth Avenue. There was a liquor store there that cashed checks. It was isolated. It was an easy target. I picked up the landline. I dialed a number I hadn't called in 4 years. I remembered it by heart. "Detective Miller," a voice answered. It was gruff, distracted. "This is the unlisted line." "It's Frank," I said. "Frank O'Connor. We worked the union detail together back in '95. There was a pause. Then the tone shifted. "Frankie, hell, I haven't heard your voice since the retirement party. Everything okay?" "No, Jim." I took a breath, and it felt like inhaling broken glass. "I have a tip on the check-and-go robbery crew." Miller's voice sharpened. "We have 0 leads on the vehicle." "I know the vehicle," I said. "Because the getaway driver is in my car," I said. My voice cracked, fracturing under the weight of the betrayal. I gave him the location. I gave him the description of the car. I told him about the ski mask. "Jim," I whispered, he's my grandson." Silence on the line. Jim Miller knew about my daughter. He knew the history. "I'm sorry, Frank," he said softly. "Please," I said, "don't shoot him. He's stupid. He's dangerous, but he's stupid." "I'll handle it, Frank. Stay put." I hung up. I sat back down. I watched the phone screen. The blue dot stopped. 5th and Main. The liquor store. I saw the time. 1:45 p.m. I closed my eyes. I could see it. I could imagine Leo pulling the mask down over his face. I could imagine him reaching under the seat for the gun. My old service pistol. The one I kept in the attic in a locked box. He must have picked the lock weeks ago. The dot sat there for 3 minutes. 3 minutes is a lifetime during a robbery. Then the dot moved. It moved fast. They were running. "Now," I whispered to the empty room. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the small remote fob. It looked like a garage door clicker. It was light plastic, cheap, insignificant. I pressed the button. On the screen, the dot stopped moving. I could see it in my mind's eye. Leo flooring the gas, expecting the surge of power, expecting the escape. I could hear the engine roar, and then nothing. The fuel pump cutting out, the lines running dry, the power steering locking up as the engine died, turning the wheel into a block of concrete. The car rolling to a dead, silent stop in the middle of the intersection, a sitting duck in a cage of steel. I reached over and turned on the police scanner I kept on the bookshelf. Static filled the room. "Suspect vehicle disabled at 5th and Main. Blue Impala. Suspects are inside. They aren't moving. Units moving in." I heard the sirens through the radio, a wailing chorus of consequences. I heard the shouting, distorted by the radio but unmistakable. "Driver, hands!" I leaned back in my recliner. The adrenaline drained out of me, leaving me hollowed out, a shell of a man. I was alone. I had just sent my only living family member to prison. I had protected the community. I had done the right thing. but my heart was destroyed. My cell phone rang. I looked at the screen. Leo. He was calling me. He was sitting in the dead car, surrounded by guns, and he was calling me. I answered. He was screaming. He was panicked, hyperventilating. It was the sound of a child who has realized the nightmare is real. "Grandpa, the car died. It just died. I don't know what happened. You gotta come get me. The cops are everywhere." I listened to his fear. It sounded like the fear he had when he was 6 years old and afraid of the thunder. I wanted to comfort him. I wanted to tell him it would be okay. But he wasn't 6. He was a man who had made his choices. He was a predator who had finally stepped into a trap he couldn't charm his way out of. "I told you, Leo," I said softly. "I told you to be careful." "Grandpa, help me. Please, tell them." "I am helping you, son," I said. My voice was steady, final. "Grandpa." "Put the phone down, Leo." I hung up the phone. I stared at the blank TV screen. The car was gone. The boy was gone. The house was silent, save for the crackle of the police scanner confirming suspects in custody. All I had left was the truth, and the truth is a lonely roommate.